Stories from Mexico, and today I'm giving you guys the full history of Los Zetas cartel. Los Zetas were one of the most powerful organizations in Mexico some years ago. They were created by the Gulf cartel, later became independent, and in a short time expanded in their areas of influence across Mexico and the United States. While they were under the Gulf cartel, they learned everything about the drug trade: financing, supplies, distribution, weapons, trafficking, profits, everything. And they had an advantage others didn't have. They were highly trained military personnel. But despite becoming one of the most violent criminal organizations in Mexico, their decline came quickly. When they entered the authorities' radar, they did so with a level of violence they never seen before that allowed them to establish a presence across half the country from border to border, from the north to the southeast. So to give you guys the full history of them, we're gonna go way back around the 1920s to talk about how the system was even set to then become a thing. At that time, in the 1920s, the western side of Mexico, Sinaloa, was smuggling drugs, and on the eastern side, known as Tamaulipas, alcohol was being smuggled. And alcohol was being smuggled because in the 1920s to the 1930s, the US had the prohibition of no drinking. I forgot the name of the law, but no alcohol was allowed. So this led to a booming black market of smugglers that made huge amount of money in Mexico because they were smuggling alcohol. And one of them that was the big dog was Juan Nepomuceno Guerra, who in 1930s, after the prohibition ended, he moved to trafficking other stuff and illicit drugs. Now he was known as Don Juan, and he was the godfather of Matamoros. He had crazy stories about how he unalived his wife on a jealous rage and faced no consequences, and even unalived Pancho Villa's son without punishment. He was finally arrested in 1991 for tax evasion but was released hours later. This man was so respected and feared that he had streets named after him in Tamaulipas. Later, he died in 2001, but in the mid-1980s, he had already begun passing his business to his nephew Juan Garcia Abrego, who convinced him to start trafficking cocaine into the United States. It's crazy to me how that guy, Juan Nepomuceno Guerra, lived a long life. He lived from 1915 to 2001. That's a lot. So basically, him and his nephew made the Gulf cartel. Garcia Abrego partnered with the Colombian Cali cartel to build a massive cocaine trafficking operation into the United States. He controlled Tamaulipas, a strategic border state with over 300 kilometers of border with the United States. His power grew so much that the DEA placed him on its top 10 most wanted list, the first Mexican to appear there. He was arrested on January 14, 1996 and extradited the next day to prevent a rescue. Today he serves multiple life sentences. His arrest marked a turning point in the U.S.-Mexico cooperation against organized crime. After Abrego's capture, the Gulf cartel became unstable. Violence increased as different men fought for control. During this time, a man named Osiel Cárdenas Guillén rose from being a small-time dealer and mechanic, who was later arrested multiple times and even became a police informant at one time, and will steal drugs from traffickers and will sell them himself. He allied with Salvador Chava Gomez, a high-ranking cartel member, and together they took over the Gulf cartel. But betrayal changed everything. Cárdenas ordered his bodyguards, Arturo Guzmán de Sena, to kill Chava Gomez so he could take full control of it. And he was later known as El Matamigo, also known as the Frank Killer, for this action. And De Sena became the first Zeta. By the late 1990s, Cárdenas needed protection from enemies. He asked De Sena to recruit highly trained men. De Sena recruited elite Mexican ex-soldiers from special forces, also known as the Gafes, many trained in the United States. At first, there were 7, then 14, then over 30. With their military training, the cartel expanded massively across Mexico, the U.S., Central America, and South America. In 2001, the U.S. offered a $2 million reward for Cárdenas. In 2002, Decena, the Zeta-1, was killed by the Mexican army, and in 2003, Cárdenas was captured. Tensions grew between the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas began rising. The split became official in early 2010 after internal conflict and an assassination. Violence exploded into war. Tony Tormentas, Cárdenas' brother, was killed by the army in 2010. Other leaders were captured and killed in the following years. At this point, Los Zetas controlled large territories and even challenged the Sinaloa cartel. They also created a new criminal model like a franchise. They will take over a town, eliminate rivals, corrupt authorities, and leave a local boss in charge who reported back to them. As their power was growing, so did their enemies. The Sinaloa cartel, La Familia Michoacanas, CJNG, and the government was after them. Under President Felipe Calderón, the government launched a massive offensive against them. Leaders were killed or arrested one by one. In 2012, Heriberto Lascano, Zeta-3, was killed. In 2013, Miguel Ángel Treviño, Zeta-40, was captured. And in 2015, his brother Omar Treviño Morales, Zeta-42, was also captured. After that, the organization weakened significantly. Los Zetas are responsible for some of the worst massacres in Mexico. One example is the San Fernando massacre, where dozens of migrants were kidnapped and executed. Another one is the Allende massacre, where an entire town was attacked, homes was destroyed, and many people were disappeared. They were also linked to the Casino Royale, which caused 53 deaths and pricing riots. After the capture of El Zeta-42, the group split into two fractions, the Northeast Cartel and Old School Zetas. They formed shifting alliances and continued operating, but never regained their former power. They never established again. Los Zetas, as they exist in the early 2000s as one of the most feared organizations in Mexico, is gone. They're long gone. But their violent legacy remains. This group still operates from their original regions, still trying to expand their criminal networks, but nobody wants them, and nobody really wants to even associate with them. And this is the full story of Los Zetas. They got too much power in their head and thought they were uncontrollable and thought they were above the law, which nobody really is.